The sun was setting over the small coastal town of Seabrook, casting a golden glow across the sandy beach. Families gathered to enjoy the last moments of warmth before the cool evening breeze rolled in. Among them was Sarah Harper, a loving mother, whose life revolved around her two daughters, Emily and Lily. At 7 years old, Emily was curious and full of energy, always eager to explore the world around her. Her younger sister, Lily, just 5, followed her everywhere, giggling at everything Emily said or did. Together, they were inseparable, and Sarah's whole world. That day had started like any other summer afternoon. After packing snacks, sunscreen, and their favorite sandcastle building tools, Sarah loaded her daughters into the car and drove to their favorite spot on the beach. The girls squealed with excitement as soon as they stepped out of the car, running barefoot toward the water. "Stay where I can see you," Sarah called after them, laughing as she carried the picnic basket behind them. For hours, the trio played, together. Emily built towering castles while Lily decorated them with seashells. They chased waves that lapped gently at the shore, their laughter ringing out like music. Sarah watched them fondly, snapping pictures on her phone to capture the perfect day. Everything seemed so peaceful, so ordinary, but sometimes life changes in an instant, and Sarah would never forget how quickly happiness turned to horror. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon orange and pink, Sarah decided it was time to pack up and head home. She knelt beside the blanket they'd spread out earlier, folding it neatly while keeping one eye on the girls. They were still close by, playing near the edge of the water, or so she thought. When she stood up to call them over, her heart skipped. "A beat, Emily, Lily?" Her voice wavered slightly, but she assumed they were simply hiding behind a nearby dune, trying to surprise her. It wouldn't be the first time they'd played hide-and-seek on the beach. She scanned the area, calling their names louder this time. Still no response. Panic began to creep in as she realized something wasn't right. Sarah dropped the blanket and sprinted toward the shoreline, her eyes darting frantically in every direction. "Emily, Lily!" she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Other families nearby noticed her distress and stopped what they were doing to help. A group of teenagers jogged along the beach, looking for any sign of the missing girls. An elderly couple searched among the rocks where children often liked to climb, but no matter how hard everyone looked, there was no trace of Emily and Lily. Minutes felt like hours as Sarah ran back and forth, tears streaming down her face. She replayed the past few hours in her mind, desperately trying to figure out what could have happened. Had someone taken them? Could they have wandered off too far? Were they hurt somewhere, unable to respond? Each possibility was more terrifying than the last. By the time the local police arrived, the beach was swarming with people searching for the girls. Officers set up a command post near the parking lot, organizing volunteers and questioning witnesses. One man claimed he saw 2 young girls walking hand in hand toward the boardwalk earlier, but when officers checked surveillance footage from nearby shops, nothing matched his description. Another woman said she thought she heard children laughing near the lifeguard station, but no one else reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. As night fell, floodlights illuminated the beach, turning the once idyllic scene into something surreal and haunting. Divers combed the shallow waters, fearing the worst. Search dogs sniffed along the shoreline, their handlers holding on to hope despite the grim circumstances. Sarah stayed by the command post, clutching a photo of her daughters and praying for a miracle. Friends and neighbors brought her coffee and blankets, offering words of comfort that barely registered through her haze of grief. Hours turned into days, and the search continued without success. Flyers with Emily and Lily's smiling faces appeared, all over town, taped to lampposts and pinned to bulletin boards. Local news stations covered the story extensively, urging anyone with information to come forward. Tips poured in, but most led nowhere. A fisherman claimed he spotted 2 girls matching their description aboard a passing boat, but when authorities tracked down the vessel, it turned out to be a dead end. Another tip came from a tourist who swore she saw the girls playing in a park miles away, but investigators found no evidence to support her claim. Through it all, Sarah refused to give up. She spent her days driving from one lead to another, following even the faintest glimmer of hope. Nights were the hardest. A alone. In her quiet house, she stared at her daughter's empty beds, imagining what they might be going through. Were they scared? Cold? Hungry? The questions haunted her relentlessly, keeping sleep at bay. Her husband, Mark, tried to stay strong for her, but the strain of the situation eventually took its toll. Arguments became frequent, fueled by frustration and helplessness. "We need to focus on finding them," Sarah would say, her voice trembling with determination. "I can't stop, not until I know they're safe." Mark wanted to believe they'd find answers, but the longer the search dragged on, the more hopeless he felt. Their marriage began to unravel under the weight of uncertainty, leaving Sarah to face the nightmare alone. Despite the setbacks, Sarah's resolve only grew stronger. She joined online forums for parents of missing children, sharing her story and learning from others who had faced similar tragedies. Some offered advice, while others simply listened, understanding the pain she carried. Slowly, a community formed around her, lifting her spirits when she needed it most. Still, the absence of her daughters gnawed at her constantly. Every holiday, birthday, and milestone passed without them, each one a painful reminder of what she'd lost. Yet deep down, Sarah held onto a sliver of hope, a belief that Emily and Lily were still alive, waiting to be found. She didn't know how or when, but she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. Not ever. The weeks turned into months, and Sarah Harper's life became a relentless cycle of searching, waiting, and hoping. Every morning she woke up with the same question in her mind. Where are my girls? Her once peaceful home now felt like a prison, filled with reminders of Emily and Lily at every turn. Their toys lay untouched in the corner of the living room. Their drawings still hung on the refrigerator, bright colors fading under the fluorescent light. Even the air seemed heavier, as if it carried the weight of their absence. Sarah threw herself into the search with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She printed thousands of flyers featuring pictures of her daughters, stapling them to telephone poles, bulletin boards, and storefront windows across town. The images showed Emily and Lily smiling brightly, Emily with her gap-toothed grin and Lily clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Beneath their photos, bold letters pleaded for help. "Missing, have you seen them?" Each flyer was accompanied by Sarah's phone number, and she kept her phone close at all times, never silencing it or letting it leave her side. At first, the calls came in steadily, tips from well-meaning strangers who thought they might have seen the girls. Some claimed to have spotted two young children matching their description at gas stations or grocery stores miles away. Others reported hearing faint cries near wooded areas late at night. But each lead ended in disappointment. Officers followed, up on every report, combing through evidence and interviewing witnesses, but none led to Emily and Lily. As time passed, the calls dwindled, and Sarah began to feel the crushing weight of silence. It wasn't just the lack of answers. It was the way people started treating her differently. Neighbors who had once offered support now avoided eye contact when they saw her coming. Friends stopped inviting her to gatherings, unsure of what to say or how to act around someone whose pain was so raw and unrelenting. Even her own family struggled to understand why she couldn't move on. "Maybe it's time to accept that they're gone," her sister suggested gently during one particularly difficult conversation. Sarah stared at her, unable to process the words. Acceptance? How could she accept something that felt impossible to believe? Deep down, she knew her daughters were alive. She didn't know how she knew. It was more instinct than logic. But she clung to that certainty like a lifeline. Giving up meant losing them forever, and she couldn't bear the thought. Determined not to let despair consume her, Sarah expanded her efforts beyond the local community. She appeared on national television shows, sharing her story with millions of viewers. Cameras captured her trembling hands as she held up pictures of Emily and Lily, her voice breaking as she begged anyone with information to come forward. Social media became another battleground in her fight. She created accounts dedicated to finding her daughters, posting daily updates, sharing memories, and urging followers to spread the word. Slowly, her posts gained traction, reaching people far beyond Seabrook. Strangers from across the country reached out to offer encouragement or share sightings, no matter how unlikely they seemed. But even as her online presence grew, Sarah couldn't ignore the toll the search was taking on her personal life. Her marriage to Mark had crumbled under the strain of their shared grief. In the early days after the disappearance, they had leaned on each other for strength, holding hands during vigils and comforting one another in quiet moments. But as weeks turned into months, cracks began to form. Mark wanted to focus on healing, on finding a way to rebuild their lives without Emily and Lily. To him, continuing the search felt like clinging to a dream that might never come true. Sarah, however, couldn't imagine giving up, not when there was still a chance her daughters were out there waiting to be found. Their arguments grew louder and more frequent, echoing through the empty house. "You're killing yourself over this," Mark shouted one evening, slamming his fist against the kitchen counter. "They're gone, Sarah. We need to face reality." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she shook her head. "I can't," she whispered. "I won't." Eventually, Mark moved out, unable to bear the constant tension. He left behind a note promising to stay in touch, but Sarah barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to a single purpose: finding her daughters. Without Mark, she felt even more isolated, but she refused to let loneliness stop her. If anything, it fueled her determination. She hired private investigators, pouring whatever savings she had left into their work. They dug deeper than local authorities ever could, tracing leads and following hunches that others dismissed as dead ends. One investigator, a grizzled man named Detective Harris, became a regular presence in Sarah's life. With decades of experience tracking missing persons, he brought a level of professionalism and persistence that gave Sarah hope. He spent hours poring over old surveillance footage, analyzing patterns, and cross-referencing data, though progress was slow. His dedication reminded Sarah that she wasn't entirely alone in her fight. Despite her tireless efforts, the emotional toll of the search was undeniable. Nights were the hardest. Alone in her bed, Sarah replayed the events of that fateful day over and over in her mind, searching for clues she might have missed. What if she hadn't turned her back for those few seconds? What if she had called the girls sooner? Guilt gnawed at her relentlessly, whispering cruel thoughts she couldn't silence. Was it her fault they were gone? To cope, Sarah joined online forums for parents of missing children. These virtual communities became a lifeline, offering support and understanding from others who had walked the same painful path. Through these connections, she learned about resources she hadn't known existed, organizations that specialized in helping families navigate the complexities of missing person cases. One group sent volunteers to distribute flyers in neighboring towns. Another connected her with a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery, though Sarah only attended a handful of sessions before deciding she didn't have time for self-care. Her priority was finding her daughters, not healing her own wounds. Amid the chaos, small moments of kindness kept her going. A local artist painted portraits of Emily and Lily, donating the artwork to hang in coffee shops and libraries. Teachers, from the girls' school, organized fundraisers to help cover investigation costs. Even strangers reached out with messages of encouragement, telling Sarah they were praying for her family or lighting candles in memory of Emily and Lily. Each gesture, no matter how small, reminded her that she wasn't fighting this battle alone. 8 months after the disappearance, Sarah stood on the same beach where her nightmare began. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the sand. She closed her eyes and imagined her daughters running toward her, laughing and calling her name. For a brief moment, the fantasy felt real enough to make her heart ache. When she opened her eyes, the beach was empty, just as it had been for months. But Sarah refused to let the emptiness break her. Somewhere, somehow, Emily and Lily were still out there, and she would find them, even if it took the rest of her life. Thousands of miles away from the small coastal town where Sarah Harper's world had been shattered, a man named Jack Morrison was living a life that couldn't have been more different. Jack was a seasoned pilot who spent most of his days flying luxury charters for wealthy clients. His job took him to some of the most exotic and remote locations on Earth, places ordinary people only dreamed of visiting. For Jack, it was just another day at work. He'd grown accustomed to the opulence of private jets, the sprawling estates of billionaires, and the breathtaking beauty of untouched islands. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover. One crisp morning, Jack received an assignment to deliver supplies to a private island owned by Victor Langston, a reclusive billionaire known for his eccentric lifestyle and vast fortune. Langston rarely appeared in public, preferring to live in seclusion on his island paradise. Very little was known about him beyond rumors of shady business dealings and extravagant parties attended by elite guests. To Jack, Langston was just another client, one with deep pockets and peculiar habits. The flight itself was routine, but as Jack approached the island, something caught his eye. Through the cockpit window, he noticed movement near the shoreline. At first glance, it seemed like nothing unusual, just figures walking along the beach. But as he descended closer, his curiosity grew. Two young girls were playing in the sand, their laughter carrying faintly over the sound of the waves. They looked happy enough, building castles and chasing each other. But something about the scene struck Jack as odd. The girls appeared too isolated, almost guarded. There were no other children around, no parents watching them, no signs of normalcy you'd expect on a family vacation. Jack's instincts kicked in. Something didn't feel right. After landing the plane and unloading the cargo, he lingered on the island longer than necessary, pretending to check the aircraft for mechanical issues while keeping one eye on the girls. From a distance, he observed them carefully, noting their features. The older girl with her dark hair tied back in a ponytail, the younger one clutching a stuffed animal as she ran barefoot through the sand. They looked healthy, well-fed, and seemingly content, but there was an air of detachment about them, as if they were performing for someone unseen. Unable to shake the feeling that something was amiss, Jack discreetly pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos. He wasn't sure why. He told himself it was just precautionary. But something about those girls stuck in his mind long after he climbed back into the cockpit and took off. On the flight back to the mainland, he reviewed the images, zooming in on the details. And then it hit him. The faces in the photos matched the descriptions he'd seen countless times before on missing children alerts. Emily and Lily Harper. The names flashed in his memory like a neon sign. Their pictures had circulated widely online, shared by desperate parents hoping for a miracle. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Could these really be the same girls? If so, how had they ended up on Victor Langston's private island? Back on the mainland, Jack wasted no time. He downloaded the photos onto his laptop and cross-referenced them with images from the missing persons database. The resemblance was uncanny. The older girl's gap-toothed smile, the younger one's wide, innocent eyes. It all lined up perfectly. Jack knew he couldn't ignore this discovery. Whatever was happening on that island, it wasn't good. With trembling hands, Jack contacted the authorities, providing them with the evidence he'd gathered. He explained everything in detail: the location of the island, the layout of the property, the behavior of the girls. Investigators listened intently, their interest piqued by the possibility of finally solving a case that had baffled them for months. Within hours, a team was assembled to look into the matter further. As news of the potential breakthrough spread, Sarah Harper received the call she'd prayed for every single day since her daughters vanished. An investigator introduced himself and asked if she could confirm whether the girls in the photos were indeed Emily and Lily. Sarah's heart raced as she scrolled through the images on her phone. Her breath hitched when she saw them, their faces unmistakable despite the slight changes brought on by time. "That's them," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "That's my girls." Though overwhelmed with relief, Sarah was warned to remain cautious. Authorities needed to verify the information and ensure the safety of the girls before making any promises. Still, for the first time in 8 long months, Sarah allowed herself to hope. She replayed the photos, over and over, memorizing every detail. Were they truly okay? Had they suffered? What kind of place had they been living in? Questions swirled in her mind, but beneath the uncertainty lay a glimmer of joy. Her daughters were alive, and now, finally, there was a chance to bring them home. Meanwhile, investigators worked tirelessly to piece together how Emily and Lily had ended up on Victor Langston's island. Surveillance footage revealed that Langston's yacht had docked at various ports around the time of the girls' disappearance, raising suspicions that he, or someone working for him, might have orchestrated their abduction. Digging deeper into Langston's background uncovered troubling connections to illegal activities, including human trafficking and exploitation. While none of these allegations had ever been proven, the circumstantial evidence painted a sinister picture for Jack Morrison. The discovery marked a turning point in his life. What had started as a routine delivery mission had turned into something far greater, a chance to make a real difference. He stayed in touch with investigators, offering his expertise and knowledge of the island to aid in their efforts. Though he didn't know Sarah personally, he imagined the agony she must have endured during those 8 months without her daughters. Knowing he might have played a role in reuniting them filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As preparations for a rescue operation began, Sarah waited anxiously, counting down the days until she could see her girls again. She packed their favorite snacks, picked out new outfits for them to wear, and even bought fresh flowers to brighten up their room. Every moment felt like an eternity, but she held on to faith with everything she had. Somewhere out there, across the ocean, her daughters were waiting, and soon, very soon, they would be together again. The discovery of Emily and Lily on Victor Langston's private island sent shockwaves through the investigative team. This was no ordinary missing persons case. It had become a high-stakes operation involving one of the world's wealthiest and most elusive individuals. Investigators knew they were dealing with someone who operated in shadows, someone who could manipulate systems, buy silence, and erase evidence if given the chance. Every step forward required precision, discretion, and an unshakable determination to uncover the truth. Detective Harris, the seasoned investigator who had worked closely with Sarah Harper since the beginning, took charge of piecing together how the girls ended up on Langston's island. He started by retracing Langston's movements during the weeks leading up to Emily and Lily's disappearance. Surveillance footage from marinas along the coast revealed that Langston's luxury yacht had docked at several ports near Seabrook, around the same time the girls vanished. Witnesses recalled seeing a group of men disembarking from the vessel, their demeanor professional yet unsettling. One fisherman mentioned overhearing snippets of conversation about acquiring assets, though he hadn't thought much of it at the time. Digging deeper into Langston's background uncovered a web of troubling connections. While publicly known as a self-made billionaire with interests in tech, real estate, and entertainment, whispers of darker dealings followed him wherever he went. Unverified reports linked him to underground networks involved in human trafficking, illegal adoptions, and even extortion, though these allegations had never been proven, largely because witnesses tended to disappear or recant their statements. They painted a chilling portrait of a man who believed himself untouchable. What stood out most to Detective Harris was the pattern. Over the years, there had been rumors of children vanishing under mysterious circumstances only to resurface later in wealthy households abroad. Authorities often dismissed these cases due to lack of evidence, but now Harris wondered, could Langston have orchestrated similar abductions for his own twisted purposes? Was this part of some larger scheme? To answer these questions, investigators turned their attention to Langston's island. Satellite imagery showed sprawling mansions, lush gardens, and state-of-the-art security systems designed to keep intruders out and secrets in. The property was essentially a fortress, accessible only by boat or helicopter. Any attempt to infiltrate, it would require careful planning and flawless execution. Jack Morrison proved invaluable during this phase of the investigation. Having flown to the island multiple times, he provided detailed maps of its layout, including potential entry points and blind spots in the surveillance system. He described the staff he'd encountered, mostly quiet, efficient workers who avoided eye contact and spoke little. There was also a sense of hierarchy. Certain areas of the island seemed off limits even to employees, guarded by men carrying weapons and wearing earpieces. Using Jack's intel, investigators assembled a covert team of operatives trained in extraction missions. Their goal was simple: locate Emily and Lily, ensure their safety, and bring them home without alerting Langston or his associates. Timing was critical. If Langston suspected anything, he could flee, or worse, harm the girls before authorities arrived. As plans for the rescue mission unfolded, Sarah Harper waited anxiously, oscillating between hope and fear. She spent hours staring at the photos Jack had taken, memorizing every detail of her daughter's faces. They looked older, their features slightly sharper than she remembered, but their expressions remained unmistakably theirs. Emily's confident stance, Lily's mischievous grin. It was all there, proof that they were still alive. Yet the uncertainty gnawed at her. What kind of life had they been living on that island? Had they been treated well, or were they prisoners in paradise? Distract herself, Sarah threw herself into preparing for their return. She cleaned their room from top to bottom, airing out the musty smell that lingered after months of disuse. She bought new bedding adorned with stars and moons, knowing how much Emily loved astronomy. For Lily, she picked out pajamas printed with bunnies, a nod to her daughter's favorite stuffed animal. She imagined the moment they'd walk through the door, how she'd wrap her arms around them, hold them close, and promise never to let go again. But beneath the surface, doubts crept in. What if the girls didn't remember her? What if they'd grown attached to whoever had been caring for them on the island? Sarah tried not to dwell on such thoughts, reminding herself that love like hers couldn't be erased. Still, the fear lingered, a dull ache in the pit of her stomach. Meanwhile, investigators made progress in connecting the dots. Financial records revealed large sums of money transferred to offshore accounts shortly after Emily and Lily's disappearance. These transactions were traced back to shell companies linked to Langston's empire. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to strengthen suspicions that Langston, or someone acting on his behalf, had orchestrated the abduction. One breakthrough came when a former employee of Langston's spoke out anonymously. The man claimed to have worked as a caretaker on the island and described seeing two young girls being brought ashore late one night. According to him, they appeared frightened and confused, clinging to each other as they were led inside. Over time, however, they seemed to adjust, adapting to their new surroundings while maintaining a guarded distance from the adults around them. Though the informant couldn't confirm whether the girls were Emily and Lily specifically, his account aligned closely with what investigators already knew. More importantly, it reinforced the urgency of the mission. Time was running out. If Langston realized his secret had been uncovered, he might take drastic measures to protect himself. Back at headquarters, the rescue team finalized their strategy. Under the cover of darkness, a small group of operatives would approach the island aboard a stealth vessel, avoiding detection by Langston's radar systems. Once ashore, they would split into teams, one tasked with locating the girls and another focused on neutralizing any threats. Communication would be minimal to reduce the risk of interception, relying instead on prearranged signals and backup plans. As the operation date approached, tension mounted among everyone involved. For Sarah, the weight felt unbearable. She alternated between pacing the floor and sitting motionless, clutching a photo of her daughters as if willing them closer. Friends and family called regularly to check on her, offering words of encouragement and prayers for a safe reunion. But nothing could ease the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Finally, the night of the mission arrived. The rescue team set out under a canopy of stars, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. Each member carried not just their equipment, but also the weight of responsibility. They weren't just retrieving two missing children, they were restoring a mother's shattered heart. As they neared the island, silence fell over the group, broken only by the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull. For Sarah, miles away and unaware of the unfolding drama, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the girls sleeping peacefully somewhere far away. Little did she know salvation was closer than ever. Within hours, the nightmare that had consumed her life for 8 agonizing months would finally begin to lift. And somewhere on that secluded island, Emily and Lily were about to experience a moment they'd dreamed of for so long. the moment they'd be free. The rescue mission unfolded under the cover of darkness, a carefully orchestrated operation designed to bring Emily and Lily home without alerting Victor Langston or his heavily armed guards. The team of operatives moved with precision, their every step rehearsed and calculated. As they approached the island aboard a stealth vessel painted black to blend into the night, the only sounds were the soft hum of the engine and the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Each member of the team carried not just weapons and gear, but also the weight of responsibility. They weren't just retrieving two missing children, they were reuniting a family torn apart by tragedy. Once ashore, the operatives split into two groups. One team focused on locating Emily and Lily, while the other secured key areas of the island to prevent interference from Langston's security personnel. Using thermal imaging devices and maps provided by Jack Morrison, the first group quickly identified the guest house where the girls were being held. It was a small, isolated structure tucked away in a corner of the property, surrounded by dense foliage that made it difficult to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. From the outside, it appeared almost charming, a quaint little cottage with flower boxes beneath the windows, but inside it was more like a gilded cage. As the operatives crept closer, they noticed cameras positioned at strategic points around the building. Fortunately, Jack's intel had prepared them for this. A tech specialist on the team hacked into the surveillance system, looping old footage to create the illusion that everything was normal. With the cameras neutralized, the operatives slipped through the front door, their movements silent and deliberate. Inside, they found Emily and Lily asleep in a shared bedroom, curled up together on a large bed adorned with plush pillows and blankets. The room was decorated with toys, books, and colorful posters, an attempt perhaps to make the space feel welcoming. But despite the outward appearance of comfort, there was an undeniable air of confinement. The windows were sealed shut, and heavy curtains blocked any view of the outside world. Even in sleep, the girls seemed tense, their expressions guarded rather than peaceful. One of the operatives gently shook Emily awake, whispering softly to avoid alarming her. "Emily, it's okay. We're here to take you home." Her eyes fluttered, open, wide with confusion at first, then recognition. She sat up slowly, clutching the edge of the blanket as if unsure whether she could trust what she was seeing. Beside her, Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes before blinking up at the strangers in their room. "Are you really here?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. When the operative nodded, tears welled up in her eyes. "We thought no one would ever find us," she said, her voice trembling. Lily reached out hesitantly, grabbing onto her sister's arm as if afraid to let go. "Is Mommy coming?" she asked, her lower lip quivering. "She is," the operative assured her, smiling warmly. "But right now we need to get you both out of here safely. Can you do that for me?" Both girls nodded, though fear lingered in their expressions. They dressed quickly in clothes left nearby, simple dresses that looked new but unfamiliar, and allowed the operatives to lead them out of the guest house. Outside, the second team had already disabled several guards patrolling the grounds, using non-lethal methods to incapacitate them without raising suspicion. The path back to the boat was clear, thanks to careful planning and coordination. As they made their way toward the shore, Emily clung tightly to Lily's hand, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds as if expecting someone to appear and stop them. The operatives reassured her repeatedly, keeping their voices calm and steady. "You're safe now," one of them said. "No one can hurt you anymore." When they reached the vessel waiting offshore, the girls hesitated briefly, staring at the dark water stretching endlessly before them. To them, it must have felt like stepping into the unknown after months of captivity. But when they saw the friendly faces of the operatives, the same people who had promised to take them home, they climbed aboard without protest. Back on the mainland, Sarah Harper waited anxiously, unaware of the drama unfolding miles away. She paced the floor of her living room, clutching a photo of her daughter so tightly that the edges began to bend. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound of a car engine sent her heart racing. Had the mission succeeded? Were they, Bringing her girls back, or had something gone wrong? Hours passed like days, each minute stretching longer than the last. Finally, just as dawn began to break, her phone rang. Trembling, she answered it, bracing herself for whatever news awaited her. "Mrs. Harper," a familiar voice said. It was Detective Harris. "We've got them. Your daughters are safe." Sarah sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably as relief washed over her in waves. For 8 agonizing months, she had lived in a nightmare, haunted by questions she couldn't answer and fears she couldn't silence. Now finally it was over. Her babies were coming home. Meanwhile, chaos erupted on Langston's Island as his security team discovered the breach. Realizing the girls were gone, Langston immediately ordered a lockdown, sealing off all exits and scrambling his private helicopter to search the surrounding waters. But the rescue team had planned for this contingency. By the time Langston's men mobilized, the operatives were long gone, leaving behind no trace of their presence except for the empty guest house. Langston himself fled the island aboard his yacht, disappearing into international waters before authorities could reach him. Investigators later uncovered evidence suggesting he had been preparing for such an escape for weeks, likely anticipating the possibility of exposure. Though frustrated by his evasion, law enforcement vowed to pursue him relentlessly, issuing Interpol alerts and freezing his assets wherever possible. His empire, once untouchable, began crumbling under the weight of scrutiny. By mid-morning, Emily and Lily arrived at a secure location where Sarah was finally reunited with her daughters. The moment they saw her, they broke free from the protective arms of the operatives and ran toward her, tears streaming down their faces. Sarah dropped to her knees, pulling them close and holding them as if she feared they might vanish again. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over, kissing their foreheads, stroking their hair. "I'll never let anything happen to you again." For a long time, none of them spoke. They simply held each other, crying and laughing and marveling at the miracle of being together again. Emily and Lily told her fragments of their story, how they had been taken from the beach, how they had spent months on the island, cared for but always watched, never allowed to leave. Sarah listened intently, her heart breaking anew with each detail, but grateful beyond words that they were alive and relatively unharmed. Though the reunion marked the end of one chapter, Sarah knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Her daughters would need time, patience, and professional help to process their trauma. But for now, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the 3 of them standing together, whole once more. Against all odds, love had triumphed, and in that moment, it was enough. The days and weeks following Emily and Lily's rescue were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah Harper. On one hand, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her daughters were home, safe, and alive. On the other hand, the reality of their ordeal began to sink in, bringing with it a flood of questions, fears, and challenges that would take time to navigate. The nightmare wasn't entirely over. It had simply transformed into something new, a journey toward healing, justice, and rebuilding the life they had lost. At first, the girls seemed almost like strangers. They clung to each other constantly, as if afraid to be separated even for a moment. Their once carefree laughter was replaced by quiet whispers, and their wide-eyed curiosity about the world had dimmed. Simple things like going to the grocery store or playing at the park left them visibly anxious. It was clear that their months on Victor Langston's Island had left scars, not physical ones, but emotional wounds that ran deep. Sarah wasted no time seeking help. She enrolled Emily and Lily in therapy sessions with counselors who specialized in trauma recovery for children. At first, the girls were hesitant to open up, retreating into silence whenever asked about their experiences. But slowly, with patience and gentle encouragement, they began to share fragments of their story. They spoke of long days spent indoors, of being told what to do and when to do it, of feeling watched even when no one was around. They described a man they called the boss, who visited occasionally but never stayed long. His presence made them uneasy, though they couldn't quite explain why. Through these conversations, Sarah pieced together a clearer picture of what her daughters had endured. It broke her heart to hear how isolated they had felt, how powerless. Yet amidst the pain, there were moments of resilience too. Emily talked about teaching Lily math games to pass the time, while Lily proudly recounted how she'd managed to sneak extra cookies during mealtime. These small acts of defiance reminded Sarah of the strength her daughters possessed, a strength she hoped would carry them through the difficult days ahead. As Emily and Lily worked through their trauma, Sarah channeled her energy into advocating for missing children and pushing for stricter laws against exploitation. She partnered with organizations dedicated to raising awareness about child abductions, sharing her family's story to educate others and prevent similar tragedies. Her advocacy became a lifeline, giving her purpose beyond her own grief. She traveled to conferences, appeared on talk shows, and met with lawmakers, urging them to close loopholes that allowed predators like Victor Langston to operate unchecked. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Communities rallied around her cause, organizing fundraisers and campaigns to support families affected by abduction. Strangers sent letters of encouragement, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. For Sarah, this outpouring of support reinforced the idea that she wasn't alone, that her fight for justice extended far beyond her own family. Meanwhile, investigators continued their pursuit of Victor Langston, though he remained elusive. Hiding behind layers of wealth and international connections, his empire crumbled under mounting pressure. Banks froze his accounts, businesses severed ties, and public opinion turned sharply against him. Former employees came forward with damning testimonies, detailing abuses they had witnessed or been complicit in during their time on the island. One revelation stood out. Langston hadn't abducted Emily and Lily for ransom or personal gain. Instead, he had planned to use them as bargaining chips in a larger scheme involving powerful figures, eager to secure legitimate heirs for their fortunes. The thought sickened Sarah, but it also fueled her determination to see him brought to justice. Interpol issued a global manhunt, posting wanted notices in airports, seaports, and border crossings worldwide. Bounty hunters joined the chase, drawn by the promise of reward money and the thrill of capturing one of the most infamous fugitives in modern history. Despite his cunning, Langston found himself increasingly cornered, unable to trust anyone, even those within his inner circle. Rumors circulated that he had resorted to living aboard his yacht, drifting endlessly across oceans in a futile attempt to evade capture. To Sarah, it was poetic justice. A man who had thrived on control now reduced to running from shadows. Back home, life slowly began to resemble some semblance of normalcy. Sarah decorated the house with bright colors and cheerful patterns, hoping to erase any lingering traces of darkness. She baked cookies every Sunday afternoon, filling the air with warmth and sweetness. Emily returned to school, excelling in her studies despite having missed so much time. Lily rediscovered her love for art, covering sheets of paper with vibrant drawings of animals, flowers, and rainbows. Both girls started sleeping soundly again, their dreams no longer haunted by memories of the island. Sarah marveled at their progress, though she knew the road to full recovery would be long. Therapy sessions continued, providing a safe space for the girls to process their feelings. Sarah attended parent support groups, learning coping strategies and finding solace in shared experiences. Together, they celebrated milestones: Emily's 8th birthday, Lily's 6th, the anniversary of their reunion, as reminders of how far they had come. On the first anniversary of their return, Sarah took Emily and Lily back to the beach where it all began. The sight of the ocean stirred conflicting emotions within her, but she refused to let fear dictate her life. Holding her daughter's hands tightly, she walked along the shoreline, listening to the waves crash against the sand. "Do you remember this place?" she asked softly. Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's where we got lost." "It's also where we found our way back," Sarah replied, smiling through tears. "And no matter what happens, we'll always find our way back to each other." Lily looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with innocence. "We're not lost anymore, right?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling her close. "You're exactly where you belong." For a moment they stood silently, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky blazed with hues of orange and pink, mirroring the hope that burned brightly within them. Sarah knew the scars of the past would never fully fade, but neither would the bond they shared. Love, resilience, and faith had carried them through the darkest of times, and those same forces would guide them into the future. Though Victor Langston remained at large, his name became synonymous with greed and corruption, a cautionary tale, whispered in hushed tones. Sarah didn't need to see him behind bars to feel closure. Justice, she realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about reclaiming power, restoring dignity, and ensuring that others wouldn't suffer the same fate. In that sense, she had already won. As they drove home from the beach, Emily and Lily sang along to their favorite songs, their voices harmonizing perfectly. Sarah glanced at them in the rearview mirror, marveling at how far they had come, and how much farther they still had to go. Life wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be. But it was theirs, filled with endless possibilities waiting to unfold. And for now, that was enough.